Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're taking a look at The Perilous Void. This is a world-building book that helps you design galaxies and sectors and planets and species and all the stuff that you would need for any kind of open-world science fiction role-playing game. I was very interested in taking a look at this when I saw that it came out because it is a sequel to The Perilous Wilds, which was a book that was very influential on me. This one was designed for Dungeon World. This one is system neutral. But The Perilous Wilds has lots of extra rules for what NPCs are doing and what traveling is like and all sorts of different stuff with worlds and dungeons and dangers. And you might see where this is going. This looks an awful lot like Maze Rats or Knave, especially its supplement, Freebooters on the Frontier, which had lots of these big D100 tables for generating spells. That might look very familiar if you've read some of my books before. So The Perilous Void is just about world building, and it is just full of tons and tons of great random tables for generating everything you might need in a sci-fi RPG. So whether you're doing something like Traveler or Stars Without Number or something Star Wars or Star Trek, this book is going to be useful for you. As usual, I will have links in the description below where you can pick this up for yourself. All right, what is inside here? Some inspiration from different sci-fi stuff, including Dune, Star Trek, Traveler, of course, Star Wars, things like Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula Le Guin, No Man's Sky, Stars Without Number. Now, the beginning of the book focuses on setting creation, so just overall how to use all of these tools together to create a universe, or at least part of a galaxy that you're going to explore. Then each section after that zooms in on some aspect of that galaxy where you can generate it in more detail. It gets all the way down to situations, incidents, and encounters you might find, NPCs, sites, and other tables like droids, starships, and anything else you might need. The book is all print on demand from DriveThruRPG, so it's not stitch bound, unfortunately, but it is quite solid. I don't think it's going to fall apart anytime soon, and the printing is quite nice. The early parts of the book are going through different terms, which I think will be pretty familiar to anyone who has done any sci-fi role-playing. Stuff like, what is an asteroid? What is an outpost? What is a megacity? There's 3 different types of systems you can generate: core systems, frontier systems, and wild systems. And there are tables in here that are keyed to each of these. So certain types of encounters will be more common when you're way out on the fringes of the galaxy, whereas it'll be different if you're more in a very civilized area. Now, this book does come with a number of PDFs that you can print out that you can use to help build your campaign. So hex maps and other just charts that you can use when you're using these tables to build real content for your players to adventure in. It recommends looking at the big picture, so maybe trying to pick a campaign frame here. Maybe you're exploring the wild frontier. Maybe it's about a galactic conflict or an age of discovery. Maybe there's a gold rush where a huge rich planet has been discovered at the edge of known space and people are flocking to it. You want to pick the themes that your campaign is going to be about to give you a little bit more focus. Of course, you could ignore this if you want to just do open world exploration. That's entirely possible too. There's lots of steps here walking through creating a setting, and it points you to the different tables that you're going to need to use. So after establishing a campaign frame, you might want to establish what kind of jump technology is available, and then what are the non-human species, what are the interstellar societies, what is the composition of each society. There's some basic tables here that you can use, but it goes into even more detail further on if you want to flesh these out further when getting into species. You want to establish society relationships, develop a local sector, develop some home systems, establish jump points between the different planets, establish secondary jump routes, and eventually you end up with a fully fleshed out sector full of adventure for players to wander around in. There's even a table for inciting incidents to really throw you into the action, like maybe you're escaping a derelict ship or there's an imminent impact in the area that you're living and you need to escape. One nice thing is that it is always reminding you that you don't need to generate the entire galaxy in order to play the game. You need to just generate the local area, flesh out the planet that they're on and a little bit of the sector, figure out where they want to go, and then flesh out those things as they explore. Unless you're really enjoying yourself, in which case, feel free to knock yourself out generating everything. For example, there is an alternate setting creation approach here, which is to not so much focus on the whole galactic structure, but to just zoom in on one sector and really flesh that out and put plenty of adventure in there. The next section gets into how to actually procedurally generate a sector. But before we look at that, a quick shout out to today's sponsor. This video is sponsored by the Land of Eam Kickstarter, which is launching the Dungeoneer Adventures Beginners RPG and the Underlands expansion. I had a chance to flip through the core rules of the Land of Eam a few weeks ago, and my kids were very impressed by it. The world feels like The Lord of the Rings meets The Muppets, and it's one of the few books I've seen that's designed to make sandbox-style play effortless and fun. The new Beginners RPG they're launching is designed as an entry point for Land of Eam players that's easy for their parents to run, and it's based on a series of middle-grade novels to get them hooked. The Underlands campaign setting adds a whole new fully fleshed out sandbox in the world below the Mucklands, packed with new marvels and dangers. Grab them both on Kickstarter right now using the link below. All right, how do we build a sector? Well, you need a big hex map, and it recommends a 10 by 10 hex map, because that way you can use 2d10 to randomly pick hexes. Once you've randomly selected a bunch of these hexes, you can then turn them into areas of interest. So these are places where there's an actually interesting star, or there's a planet, or there's a nebula, and then you can start building all these jump gates and connections between them. And there are tables for everything, from star types to nebulas to anomalies. Maybe there's a sentient star or a warp vortex or a void whirl. When working on system creation, you can ask yourself things like, what is the system's population like? Where do they live? Is this a satellite, an asteroid, a gas giant, artificial satellite, a stellar phenomenon, and things like that. The section on world creation is one of the most detailed sections in the book, as you might imagine, because there are a ton of possible options for planets, starting off with the position and climate, because the climate is going to affect many other aspects of the planet. What are some main features of it? Is it tidally locked? Magnetic inversion? Is it shattered? Other stuff like world size is going to affect the gravity and how many moons it's likely to have. And then we have tables for each type of world. So super cold worlds or cold worlds, and then temperate worlds or hot worlds are going to have different tables because that's going to affect a lot of aspects of the planet, all the way from its resources to how much water it has, its atmospheric density, atmospheric composition, what kind of gases are there, and whether there is any kind of life, from microbial all the way up to complex. Tables for every single possible kind of atmosphere that might be there. Is that atmosphere flammable? Is it deadly? The only really safe one is, of course, nitrogen and oxygen if you're talking about humans. Let's say you've got a barren world here. You can roll on these two tables and combine them together. So some features might be that there are rocky patterns or labyrinthine fissures, or there are dune spires. On a frozen world, there might be ice caves or crystal hills or reflective riverbeds. There's different resources like water, ice, or mineral ores, different kinds of hazards, and what life has to do to adapt to live there. This goes through arid worlds, oceanic worlds, arboreal worlds, Earth-like worlds, volcanic worlds, metallic worlds, so you have tons of options and lots of variety. There's a resource guide covering both real and fictional elements that you might want to try to excavate, and a section on creating new life forms, from microbial to simple to complex, and even non-human species. Now, although this book does cover a lot of information, it is trying to cover everything in a galaxy. So I think there are some tables that could be fleshed out even further. For example, we got non-human species right here with some special abilities like electrical generation or natural weaponry, stuff that you might see in a sci-fi TV show or movie. But you could flesh this out even further using a lot of the tables in my book, Knave 2nd Edition, which has hundreds of entries for generating magic and weird monsters, stuff that's more fantasy themed, but there's plenty of material that is compatible. That's especially true when it comes to creating aliens and NPCs, because it doesn't really matter whether you're sci-fi or fantasy when you're fighting a weird monster. For example, when looking at non-human species, you could easily use the powers table or the monster traits table to create even stranger aliens. One thing that's really great from an ecological point of view is that there is a section on lifeform adaptions. So when you're looking at aliens, you need to know how these aliens fit into an ecological niche. How are they able to survive on the different extreme environments where you might discover them? And there's lots of great examples of how that's possible. For example, maybe they are resistant to radiation, or they have a lightweight skeleton, which lets them fly better. They have maybe dense tissue, enhanced jumping. So whenever you're thinking about these worlds that you're making, you should also be thinking, how are creatures going to live here? There's a section on creating societies with a section for tech levels, very reminiscent of what we see in games like Traveler. What is the society's condition like? Is it collapsing? Is it booming? What is their political system? And that's going to vary by their technological level. So very advanced societies might have an AI dominion or a post-scarcity utopia, whereas very low-level ones might be an isolationist enclave or an elder council. When you're making factions, I like how they often have a complication. So maybe it is a mysterious or esoteric faction that is dealing with fading glory. Or maybe it's an environmentalist faction that is dealing with relentless pursuit of people trying to destroy them, presumably. Every type of faction can have special assets associated with it. And then you can get into community generation, which goes through what is their profile, what is the problem that they're dealing with, like power failure or contamination, or they're being invaded. Tables for places you can visit, like outposts and space stations and colonies and villages and towns and cities and everything you can think of. This zooms all the way down to the district level and even the buildings in each district that you could explore. So there is a huge amount of zoom available here. Development creation is more looking at things that are happening, things that players are going to interact with, so more gameable stuff. This covers things like incidents and encounters out in the void, encounters on a world, activities that you might just run into someone doing. like seeking help or healing and repairing or inquiring or soliciting. There's events that you can mix together, and there's multiple prompts for each of these different themes. Like if you roll the heresy theme, it might be a witch hunt or forbidden belief spreads or an ancient text resurfaces. The rest of the book covers things like jobs, really great if you're running a kind of mercenary or Firefly-like campaign. Items, different types of NPCs you might run into, generating new NPCs with their species, occupation, motivation, traits, and details. So you're going to get new ones every time you roll. Generating new sites like derelicts or facilities to explore or ruins to delve into, and plenty of extra tables that you might need like droids and spaceships, gadgets, details, satellite and star names, faction names, NPC names. These are kind of fun. For example, if you want to make a faction, let's create one right here. Let's say this faction is a brotherhood. Its adjective is the false, and the noun is the devils. So you're fighting the false devils, or maybe the cloud garden, or the glorious death. But you can also remix the words in a number of different ways. So you might have the righteous guild, or the lunar brotherhood, or the solar council. Lots of syllables you can mash together to generate NPC names and surnames if you want sci-fi type names. And there we go. There is just a huge amount of information in here. Frankly, if I was running any kind of sci-fi game where you're traveling from planet to planet, Traveler is probably the one I played the most, but there's lots of OSR ones out there as well. This is the supplement that I would use. Stars Without Number is another book that's recommended a lot. That one is free, so I would check that one out. But I think this one is much more complete and detailed when it comes to generating all of this stuff. The sheer scale of a science fiction RPG is probably the most intimidating thing about it. If you can travel to any planet, if you can go in any direction to any world and visit any civilization, how do you know what's going to be there? How are you going to get fresh ideas that are going to be surprising and interesting to your players? So books like this, I think, are essential for doing that. Let me know in the comments below if you have recommendations for books that you use to help you run sci-fi games. And thanks for watching, everybody. I'll see you next time.